the PDQ Live team with Jordan, Tara, JJ, Jake, Chase, me, with special guest Connor McGregor. It's PDQ Live.
I feel like that one deserved another go.
Hey everybody, welcome to PDQ Live. We're talking Sims today, and apparently my security score within this company is so poor they brought in our security expert to correct my bad behavior.
Well, we actually needed two security experts to correct your bad behavior.
This is an intervention.
Yeah, true. I get an email alert every 5 minutes.
I bypass a couple of two-factor authentications and everyone freaks out.
That's right. Yeah. It just says, it's Jordan again, Rachel. Yes, Jordan, this is Rachel Coleman. She's our senior SOC analyst here at PDQ. You might know her.
We've become very familiar over the last couple weeks.
Yes. And then we also have Matt Warner. He is the co-founder and CTO of Blumira. Hi, Matt.
Hi, happy to be here. Excited to be here.
Well, we need you. Don't we?
Jordan does, especially.
I was...
Yeah, we do like to look for the 2FA bypasses, so it's a big one.
I was doing a podcast and still got caught in a phishing scam. I wasn't even supposed to be on email at the time.
That's impressive. Well done.
That is impressive, Jordan. Only you could really do that.
I have a gift.
You do.
Incompetence.
You do.
I love to hear that.
Matt, is that a guillotine in your background? I just got to ask.
That's what everyone asks. So this one, I just leave it there. It's actually a water rower that I never use because I don't physically ever move. So yeah, it's just my guillotine at this
Just
point.
felt like it was a necessary question. Chase was getting concerned,
Yeah.
Anyways.
It could be. If it makes you feel more excited about the situation, let's say it is a guillotine. Yeah.
I think it makes you seem cooler, Matt, so let's go with it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Let's
All
do
right.
it right, yeah.
It's a guillotine.
Okay, yeah, for sure.
They have a different policy for bad security practices at Blumira.
That's right. That's for people who disable MFA, Jordan.
It's full context.
Exactly.
Send me the link because I need that.
Yeah, in your office. Okay, so should we start? Should we talk about security?
I guess.
I guess we have to. Kelly's making us.
I need more enthusiasm, please.
Yay, security! So let's really start at the ground because I'm not going to lie, you guys. The more I research security, the more horrified I am. So, can we just talk about what exactly a SIEM is, please? Matt, do you want to tell us exactly what it is?
Sure, yeah. So a SIEM, kind of at its base, is it's an application or a program that's going to pull log data in. It's going to aggregate that data, which means it's going to parse that data, make it usable, and then it's going to make that data either pass through an engine that allows it to alert on it, or it's going to make it available for someone in that company to do some amount of research on that data. So reporting, threat hunting maybe, but really all it is in the grand scheme of life is a thing that you're going to send your logs into. It's going to make those logs usable, and you're going to look for bad stuff in those logs, or maybe just operational things in those logs as well. So it becomes a really important part of a stack when it comes to getting information out of your environment, being able to review what's happening in your environment, and then being able to take next steps associated with it. But classically, it's also a miserable thing to get set up and working properly.
Okay, so Blumira is an example of a SIEM, yes?
Yes.
So, okay, back in the day, now let's go back like 10 years. Is Splunk a SIEM?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, Splunk, I wanted to kill myself with Splunk.
I feel that.
So many logs, I didn't know what to do with any of the information.
Yep.
So tell me, can we talk about how do you make a SIEM useful? How do you pare down that information so I just don't ignore all of those logs?
Sure, yeah. So the biggest issue with SIEMs classically, and you definitely called it out, is that they are kind of either overly loud, depending on how they were set up by default, or they're just incredibly difficult to get up and maintain at scale. And especially Splunk, if we go back 10 years, you had to run it all internally. There was no cloud version of it. You really just had to maintain the entire kind of indexing and data storage with it, which is just miserable. And if you had to bring any data in that was new to you, you had to figure out how you were going to get it parsed properly and structured properly. And if you wanted to have any sort of common information between types, it was a big fight to get it all working the way you wanted it to. And the way that we at Blumira think about what a SIEM could or should be is that it really has to be something that, as IT professionals, you don't have to think about any of that. You don't have to think about what the scale is. You don't have to think about how data is parsed. You don't have to think about how data is ingested. Because realistically, in 2022, somehow nearly 23, we shouldn't have to sit down and think about, like, how is my data structured? We really should be able to just act on what's happening in my data. And that's really kind of the main kind of thrust as to where SIEM needs to go as an industry, just generally.
Yeah, because I don't want to think about it at all, really. Rachel probably does, but
I don't. I mean, I've demoed 10 plus SIEMs, and it's, it's difficult.
Yeah.
So I'm going to bring it into Exchange just because that's what I understand. When I was Exchange admin, the amount of logs that I would get became noise. I didn't check anything. So I had to go through and I wrote a bunch of PowerShell that basically said, if this condition that you're learning about lasts for this amount of time, then let me know. Just kind of remove the noise. So if something was going bad, I'd actually pay attention to it, which says a lot about my personal work ethic. But is that kind of the idea behind the SIEM? Is it just more of instead of just overwhelming information, it's just if something is a certain way, then we only get the most relevant updates.
I think that's the hope with the SIEM. That's usually not how it goes. But the goal, I think the overarching goal of the world when you leverage a SIEM is to get the information out that you want and need that's most relevant to you. So like when we think about Exchange or when we see Exchange, especially these days, especially if you're running on-prem Exchange still and you're actually exposing it to the internet, which if you are, probably time to stop doing that because it's just a tiring world that you're in at this point. Proxy shell attacks against those environments, basically dropping web shells into those Exchange environments. Those are the big ones you got to look for in Exchange these days. If someone attacking my Exchange server, of course, it never hurts to look for mailbox backups and things like that. But realistically, if you're running on-prem Exchange, your number one is how do I make sure I didn't just get popped these days, sadly.
Well, the only role you need to expose externally is the edge transport. I guess I'm taking this off topic, but I mean, if
for
it's
hybrid,
if it's only edge transport that's exposed, the rest is still internal. Are you still at the same risk, or is like I don't know? I've been out of it for too long now to know.
Yeah. Okay, so tell me this. Oh, sorry.
No, we get super deep into that. So,
well, maybe let's just talk. Let's narrow it down just a little bit. So, is a SIEM best for small businesses, for enterprise, for everybody? What's the best use case for a SIEM, you guys?
I think that depends on your security stack. I think the big question is MDR versus SIEM. Can I handle it myself or do I need to outsource it? What does my team look like? But then, you get an MDR and they're really loud and they're constantly bothering you and it becomes alert fatigue. So, Matt, maybe you can add to that.
Well, first, wait, I want to get some definitions from you guys, these buzzwords, because you hear them all the time, and I think if you're like me, you're like, what's that again? Okay, so first, what's a SOC?
Security Operations Center. It's the meat of your security within your company.
So that's you?
That's me.
Okay. What's an MDR or MTR? What are the differences?
Well, MDR is managed detection and response. And so usually that's your article, Fred, Canary, Expel, those people who you send them your data, they analyze it, and then they send you security alerts or recommendations.
Okay. MTR?
Matt, I'll let you take that one.
So MTR, the Sophos MTR, I'm guessing you're referring to in that situation. MTR is very similar to MDR. It's just Sophos's kind of version of their structured response service. And very much the point of MDR versus SIEM versus what does your company have versus the position you're in. The way that we and that I over here at Blumira look at it is that really any company has the need for something like a SIEM, but classically any company doesn't have the ability to leverage a SIEM is really what it comes down to. If you are a 15, 20 person company and you have one IT person, generally speaking, historically, you're not going to sit down and put a SIEM in place. It just doesn't make sense for you to do that because you're probably just trying to get through the day because you have so many different things to do at that point.
Right.
Whereas our approach and kind of our belief is that MDRs aren't necessarily the answer to to the point made of they can be really loud and the context can be missing, just in regard to what's happening in your environment. And it becomes really important and really possible as we have more ease of use in the SIEM world, like we do here at Blumira, we hope, is that it allows those organizations to actually be able to move forward, reduce their risk, identify threats, and not have to be like, well, who the hell am I going to find to manage this SIEM Splunk for me? I don't know who's going to do it. They don't know my environment. I hope they give me the right stuff. When they call me at 3 a.m. about some random thing, does it even matter? And as we all know in the IT and security world, once you get annoyed enough times with a specific product, that product is just dead to you.
Yeah.
And you just have to kind of work through it and figure out what's best for your organization. And that has to evolve in security for sure.
So in my past positions, I've used Sophos, the last 2 positions, and I've paid for the MTR because I'm not a security expert and I want to be told when I have a real threat. But now that I've learned about the SIEM world and all the other things that you can cover, I would probably be more inclined to not pay for the MTR, but rather pay for a SIEM because of all the other areas that you would cover. So Matt, can you kind of talk about those integrations that you can bring into a SIEM that others might not know about? Like your firewall and everything else that you can kind of be watching for.
Yeah, so the way that we kind of look at SIEM and we look at data coming into your SIEM platform, we think about where there's the most risk down to where's the most kind of visibility across your environment. So generally speaking, we're going to start with endpoints. Where could people actually be attacked? Where could an attacker land in that environment? So it could be endpoints, it could be servers in that environment, going back to Exchange. Then we're starting to talk about what's controlling your access and your identity. Is it Active Directory? Is it Microsoft 365? Is it Google? Depending on, of course, from the previous conversation today, what does it matter in your environment? Who controls the authentication in your environment? And then how is that actually getting transported around? Do you have firewalls in place that are passing that traffic around? Yeah. Do you have something in front of your email like Mimikatz that's going to validate them for threats? Are you leveraging any other technologies that are passing around either traffic or authentication or files? And how are those all fitting across it? Because realistically, your SIEM should be able to pull all that together. So when you get that alert, hopefully you don't get an alert, but let's say you get an alert that says, this IP created a new domain administrator. You want to be able to track that back through your firewalls, through your endpoints, and say, well, now I know exactly how this occurred. I know that this session started on this VPN. I know that when they landed on this VPN, they got this IP, and I know that this IP did this thing. And it allows you to have that whole path in an easy way if you can have all that data in one place.
So, and maybe I just want to ask you one question, but then can we take a look at the Mitre model in a second, and you can maybe just talk us through that? But just so I understand, Matt, so instead of looking in my Sophos dashboard and seeing the 17,000 alerts that I get every day and freaking out, and looking at my firewall logs and looking in my Mimikatz, you're saying that if I have a SIEM, you're going to consolidate all of those into one dashboard, and I'm just going to look one place and get alerted from one place, and you take all that data and make it make sense and kind of pare it down. Is that the basic idea?
Yeah, you got it.
Okay.
That's the idea, yeah.
Okay. So do you mind just kind of talking us through the Mitre guidelines, and first of all, say what it is and why is it so important in the world of security?
Sure, yeah. So the Mitre attack framework and Mitre as a
Kelly, can you throw up the Mitre guideline for us? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, it's up, or it will be.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry, Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, no, you're good. Mitre as a whole is a nonprofit that basically builds out the tactics, techniques, and procedures. So the methods of kind of how attackers move through an environment, and they maintain them for a variety of different ways that attacks occur. So there's some for mobile devices, there's some for Kubernetes, there's the kind of like initial one that we're seeing here. And they basically walk you through the kill chain. So the way that an attacker could get into your environment. Starting with the initial access that you see on the left, going all the way over to, well, this isn't a bit of an odd order, actually. Usually it would be discovery, initial access, execute persistence. So it's in a slightly different order here. But generally speaking, what we're looking for is how are people discovering that there's a way to attack? How are they getting into that environment through that initial access? How are they executing inside of that environment, which is to say, like, how did they get that thing on this machine, and how are they able to actually get into it? Then moving into persistence, privilege escalation, and any sort of evasion or impact or exfiltration of data, generally speaking. So what it really allows you to do is you walk through it in one that's ordered as it pertains to the kill chain at the very least. It lets you look across the framework and say, well, where can I detect this? And you'll see a lot of vendors, which is no offense to them, you'll see a lot of vendors talk about things like, well, we have 100% coverage across the Mitre attack framework, and we can do really good because we can detect every single thing. But realistically, it's exceedingly difficult to actually detect everything across the framework. And you probably don't actually need to detect everything across the framework. You need to be able to detect in pieces and have defense in depth across your environment to say, well, I know that there are the ways that people get in my environment through Microsoft 365, MFA bypass, application passwords, being able to man the middle, a variety of different ways to get into 365, or if they are able to get past that initial access, how do I know that they're there? Do I look for mail forwarding rules being created? Do I look for the kind of patterns that we know that attackers are going to do? And if you do that across each kind of stage, it allows you to get broad visibility across the entirety of that kill chain, which makes up the Mitre attack framework. But in general, it's just a really good encyclopedia in every way for the different kinds of attacks that occur across the differential of groups that are out there attacking all of us every day.
So, Kelly, if we do the kill chain one, we just have a couple more graphics. We just kind of wanted to show why you're still talking
Do you
about
want
it.
kill chain? I've got tactics, techniques, and procedures. Is that the one
let's
you're
do
looking at?
TTP and then kill chain, and Matt can just kind of continue talking about it.
While we're pulling that up, I do have a question. Because I heard the other day that if someone gets into your network maliciously, it takes on average 20 days to catch the person that's in there or to realize you've been breached. Is a SIEM kind of there to shorten the time to make sure they do less damage, or is it there to prevent that person from getting in?
I would say, for a SIEM, it's more of the reactive approach rather than the proactive, right? Because
so if you could get the 120 days down to 30 days, that's a big win for you. It's not because, breach happens, but...
Yeah, so, you think about it, logs are what has already happened, and you're ingesting those, and so that's why it's more of a reactive approach, and so you do probably want to supplement that with some, threat hunting to help with that proactive part.
Well, and I think it depends on how reactive you are to the alerts, because if you, in the way Blumira at least is set up, and I probably shouldn't be talking, Matt can elaborate, but they have P1, P2, and P3 severity. So if you pay attention to all the P1s and it says this user was trying to log in from South Africa, and you stop it before it actually becomes a problem, then I guess it could be preventative. Matt, is that accurate or...
Yeah, no, you make a very good point. And the way that we approach detection at Blumira is a bit different than the way a lot of different SIEMs approach it, or just detection is approached, in that we try to make sure that it's more focused on leading risks or suspect behaviors that are in an environment, because we want people to know before the bad, like realistically, you want to know before you get ransomed. You don't want to get ransomed and then go back through all your logs and be like, here's where it started 130 days ago, and there was a 3-month dwell time, and here's where they encrypted us, which is a fairly normal thing to see these days, and especially in the world of SMB. But if you are able to move that up and say, well, you know what, we're going to send you alerts when you've exposed RDP, we're going to send you alerts when someone does anything that's potentially strange in your environment, like running net user commands, which is a fairly normal thing in the IT world, but it's also something that every single ransomware group is going to do the moment they land in your environment. So making sure that you track that behavior in your environment reduces that dwell time and that time from months, because it used to be 400 days. Like 10 years ago, it was like 400 days to be able to remove someone from your environment. So it's down a lot over the last few years, but you really have to move that detection from weird thing happening because I know I got encrypted to weird thing happening behavior based that we could see from attackers. So did that shell start to land? Are we seeing weird things happening in that environment? That's really where you get ahead of that and move that from reactive, which is classically what SIEM does, into kind of like a mix of reactive, proactive in the grand scheme of it all.
Yeah. So I think they're getting that graphic, but let me just ask you this question, because this might be a good segue, Matt. So the techniques and procedures. You touched kind of briefly on this, Matt. Do you have anything to add to this?
Yeah, so this is, I mean, it's a really good example of what we see all the time in the SMB space. So like 500, 1,000 users and less. We see this a lot where you don't have MFA yet on your VPN for whatever reason. Maybe you're an organization that hasn't yet defined who should be a domain administrator and not, and perhaps your domain administrators have VPN access. And in those situations, that VPN is almost always going to get hit. And this pattern that you see here, like dark web credentials or password spraying into the remote access, into the endpoint, into Active Directory, dump out the creds, and then move in, is a pattern that we see all of the time. And it's a it's a technique and it's a general tactic that we see really, really constantly. And the way to detect that is kind of going back to your initial question of what data do you send? It means you need to have authentication logs, you need to have VPN logs, you need to have endpoint logs, and you need to have broad visibility into your Active Directory as well to see the entire kind of path of attack. However, what that also allows you to do is move up that process and say, well, now I know that someone is doing this. They're looking to get information because they're at that endpoint in that third circle, trying to move into my Active Directory to dump it out. So it does allow you to start to reduce that time to respond and time to detect by looking at these TTPs, these tactics, techniques, and procedures that are coming out of these groups. Because one of the biggest things that we learn in IT and security as you look back 10, 20 years is that it is not wildly different. It does not change all that much. There are new techniques added. There are new procedures added on a regular basis by different groups. They're not added to the extent where it's like mind blowing. Like when Log4j came out, everyone's like, this new thing, it's going to ruin everything. But we all adjusted, made detections, moved forward, and it is no longer that. It's just one of those areas where in security, we just kind of have to keep growing and changing. And while we're doing that, making sure that we don't look at TTPs like this and say, well, now I'm going to really focus on this one area. It's just really important to be broadly holistic for your environment just as much as it is for security application as well.
Yeah. So one thing I just want to ask you, because we're, as Kelly adroitly pointed out, we have way too much content to cover in this one webcast. But one thing I really like about Blumira, and I think Rachel agrees with this, is I like the idea of being able to stop the cyber kill chain movement with your workflow and playbook. Do you want to talk a little bit about that with Kelly, if he can put up that graphic for you? Can you just talk about how you could potentially stop that movement with your playbooks and getting those the little alerts in your system?
Which graphic was that, Tara?
It should be called Cyberkill. He can just talk.
I'm always happy to just talk.
Yeah, there you
go. You talk, and we'll figure out what graphic we have here. Go ahead.
Yeah, so at Blumira, one of the main kind of thrusts and goals we had in regard to trying to help solve those problems that are detected is associated with generating playbooks that are built by our own incident detection engineers for every detection that occurs within the product. And they really range in what you are supposed to do as you do get that playbook. And the goal of it is really to ensure that your organization, whoever is using it, can get broad visibility across that platform, which is to say, it's important to track when a domain administrator is created in Windows. It's also important to have the history there. It's important to have case management around who acknowledged that there was a domain administrator created. And really, it's as simple potentially as saying, yeah, I did create the domain administrator. I intended to do that. And that's okay, because from an auditing perspective, you want to be able to know, yes, I did create this domain administrator. I intended to do that. However, if you didn't create that domain administrator, it's just as important, and this is the way that we approach this at Blumira, to then bring up an additional threat and say, well, now you have a rogue domain administrator in your environment. And that needs to be resolved in an entirely different way than just acknowledging that there was a domain administrator. Because we're talking about something that's a suspect, did you do this, getting elevated into a threat you have a very bad thing that's happened in this environment. You have someone who controls your domain that you were unaware of.
Yes.
And the same really applies across a lot of our different responses, which is to say, if you have someone password spraying, which means that you have a single organization or maybe multiple IPs that are basically trying a small number of authentications across a large number of users.
Mm-hmm.
If you have someone who's trying to do that, it's really the easiest way to get into an environment, because even with good password policies, so long as you make people change them regularly, like it's almost winter 2023. I would guess if you pass winter capital W 2023 exclamation point, you will catch some passwords at a big organization. Guaranteed.
Matt,
it is
Rachel's stroking out now. She's freaking out.
You know what? I've heard that one. I've heard that one from my mother. So,
So I just want to give a quick example of what Matt's talking about, because I actually did it with their product, because I obviously used Jordan as my guinea pig, because why wouldn't I, Jordan, right?
That's what I'm here for.
So I went into our pretend tenant and I forwarded mail to an external source, and Blumira said, hey, this mail just got forwarded to an external source. Are you aware of this? And then it wanted me to mark it. Did I know it happened? And if I didn't know it happened, it said, okay, do this. Here's some suggestions for you. And then I went in and I took away his global administrator role, and then I added it back. And then it gave me an extra scary alert, and it said, hey, someone made Jordan a global administrator. Is this a good idea? And I'm like, absolutely not. Terrible idea.
I feel like I'm trustworthy.
And then it said, woo, bad problem, do this. So I was very interested in the way it handled it, because it gave me recommendations.
So this is obviously not from any real life example and would never happen, but let's say someone put an enterprise admin on a printer, which is not secure. Would Blumira catch that?
Would it, Matt? Would it?
Sure. Yeah. It would alert on the fact that you added a user to the enterprise admin group, and then of course someone would have to then ask you, why did you put a printer in the enterprise administrator group? Of course, and
Well,
that would be a whole different conversation.
I'm not saying it happened, but I don't know.
Yeah. No, Jordan would probably test it. He'd do the dumbest thing possible just to see if it alerts him.
All right. Are you guys ready for a few questions?
Yes, sir.
All right. Let's take some questions. All right. What is the impact of the monitoring on the computer resources, network, connectivity, server power? Marcel L.
It's a great question, and something that's changed so much over the last 10 to 15 years, where when any organization that's still running metal spinning disks, like if you're still running metal disks and you're trying to move into a large logging infrastructure, you will have pain associated with it. It's just kind of the way it is. You really have to move to SSD if you want to be able to do large-scale logging. And we see this pretty often with older infrastructure where their Active Directory or domain controllers are still on older hypervisors that are still using spinning disks. Even if they're fast, they're going to get behind. And that's okay, depending on how you're doing log ingestion. What's going to end up happening is that your logs will be slower. So you'll see them 20 to 30 minutes later than you usually would if you were having a faster disk read out of your environment. It might slow down your environment, but generally speaking, that's not what we see. There's also some impact when you start thinking about more like advanced endpoint detection and response agents. Like sysmon can sometimes cause oddities, and that's what we often leverage in environments. However, it kind of goes back to the horsepower in a machine. If you have machines from the last few years, they're fine. If you're still running a hypervisor from 10 years ago, it might have some issues. And the big one that we always see is that it's important to kind of think about how much bandwidth you have going out. Especially for Blumira, we don't charge based off data volume. You can send us 10 terabytes a day. I don't really care. Send us how much data you want. If you can generate 10 terabytes a day, I'd be very impressed. But if you can send 10 terabytes a day is a whole other conversation. And if that works for you is another one as well. So in our experience, there's very little impact to the organization, very little impact to the internet as a whole. But what it or I should say your pipe as a whole, but what it tends to impact is, or bring to the surface is, what's the age of my endpoints or the age of my servers? What does my hypervisor look like? How have I built out my environment? And do I need to start updating these laptops because I'm still running these older ones for these users? That tends to be where we see the most, this is not powerful enough for what I need out of this.
All right. Let's move on to another question. What is the business pricing structure for Blumira? Pricing for education customers. Sincerely, Billy Z.
Well, I like how the lighting changes. Awesome. So Blumira prices based off size of the organization. So if you have 100 people that work at your company, and by 100 people, I mean people that actually are like knowledge workers. Like if you have 400 workers that never touch a computer email, we don't care about those. We don't make you pay for those. We don't make you pay for data volume. All we make you pay for is $16. Well, the list is $16 a month per user per month. Sorry, having trouble this morning, clearly. 16 users, $16 per user per month for the size of your organization. That's it. There are no other changes in that pricing. We do not make you pay for volume or anything else, and we give you unlimited ability to collect any sort of logs from your environments at that point. So you get unlimited sensors, you get unlimited honeypots, unlimited whatever you want. You just have to pay that flat price for how big your company is. That also means that the price doesn't change every year. It's really built to be stable for your organization, because in the world of SMB especially, if you don't have predictable pricing, it's just hell to try to implement a SIM. And it's really intended to be as stable as possible. And we do have EDU discounts. We have a number of universities that we work with. We really like universities just because there isn't yet really a ton of investment in security in universities. And we want to make sure that there's a SIM that's usable and available to them.
All right, next question. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, go for it.
All right, new question. How do you prevent a DDoS attack? Try Mad Sky.
You have 20 seconds, Matt.
Well, if you ask Google and Microsoft and Cloudflare, you don't. You eat the traffic until they stop. That is the answer, modern answer with DDoS attacks, to be quite honest. Otherwise, you put Cloudflare in front of it. It's very cheap. It's nearly free. If you want to stop a DDoS, that's how you do it. Resources, the way to do it these days. You will not stop it otherwise, unless you're like a nation state or Microsoft, then maybe. But otherwise, you put horsepower in front of it, put Cloudflare in front of it, let them eat the traffic.
That was
$20 a year or month. Sorry.
That was darn close to 20 seconds.
Yeah.
So that's impressive. Well done.
Tried.
Well done.
I like it.
All right, next question up. When will PDQ inventory have a direct integration ability to a SIM and or an ITSM service now? Sincerely, Sean.
Wow.
I would also like to know that.
Yeah, are we going to have the answer to that, Jordan?
I mean, I could throw out all kinds of wrong information, but as far as the future of the product, I think right now it's existing products, Connect, which is in beta, and then the Simple MDM, and I'm forgetting one.
Smart Deploy.
Smart Deploy.
I think that's going to be we're going to get back to you. Yes.
Yeah, if there are plans, I'm not privy to it.
Yeah.
I'm very low.
If you can get what you want from the PowerShell scanner, it's already there. But that does require.
It would require a lot of fine tuning, because you can use PowerShell scanner to go through the logs, but you'd have to really fine tune what kind of logs you're looking for. So it could work, but it would be, I think, an inefficient way to go about it.
But it sounds like a good side hustle for Jordan. All right, maybe not. Maybe not. All right, next question up for bids here. Is Blumira an MSSP with a SOC team assigned to customers like, say, Rapid7 or Arctic Wolf, or are you just providing SIM services we manage/monitor? Sincerely, Craig M.
All right, that's really kind of the question of the day always for Blumira. So we are not an MSSP, and the way that we approach this is that we believe you do not need an MSSP, and you do not need that team like Arctic Wolf and Rapid7. And really it's because the way that we do detection and the way that we approach giving you the information is going to be contextual and important to your environment. And we do have a 24/7 security operations team that's available for any questions. They aren't dedicated to you, but they are fully available 24/7, and they know your data and they will help you. And we also have technical account managers assigned to everyone. So it's one of those areas that we believe that we are able to provide a better service than you're going to get out of Rapid7 and Arctic Wolf by having people available to you 24/7 if you need them. And the platform will call you if something bad is happening. And if you need help, they're always available to support you, generally speaking. And what we find is that there are better security outcomes when we do that instead of being the annoying kind of like fake SOC that will call you and be like, hey, by the way, did you know a domain name was created? And it's like, well, yeah, you already know that. We alerted you to that. If you need help, we'll call us and we'll help you whenever we can. And it has worked out well for us. But we also work with MSPs. So any MSPs that want to become MSSPs, reach out. Feel free to layer Blumira into your environment. We're always happy to do that as well.
Matt, are you going to be waking me up at 3 a.m. with alerts?
Depends what happened in your environment.
Jordan bypassed MFA.
I would never
At
do
3
that
a.m.
again. That you took my access.
You could just say Jordan
I did.
and end it at that.
Yeah.
I did take all his access recently.
I don't know what I did.
Yeah. The way that we approach that is you get to pick how you want to be woken up. So if you want to be woken up by a priority 1 threat, by all means, that's your choice to get called or texted or however you want to be reached out to in regard to that. Maybe you don't want to be called in the middle of the night for a priority 3 threat, which is totally fair. And I don't want to be called for a priority 3 threat. And that allows you, and the platform allows you to say, well, I only want to get called for this one, priority 1 threats. But for everything else, I'll just check my email or check my text messages associated with it. So we want to make sure, kind of going back to the previous question, we want to make sure that it's your choice as to how you want to be alerted and notified across the platform.
All right, we've got about
You know better than we do.
Yeah, we got about 4 or 5-ish questions left in the queue. Let's do what we like to call a speed round. We'll see how fast we can get through these. All right. Does this also detect vulnerabilities, or do they offer a vulnerability management tool? Muscatine C.
We look for attacks associated with vulnerabilities. So when you're talking about proxy shell, printer, Privesk, from all the good days in 2021, anything associated with that, we look for attacks associated with them. However, we are not a vuln scanner, no. We've been looking at adding in that feature over the next year or two. So if you're interested, you should reach out and tell people, and then we will build it.
Well done. That was quick. Next question. Next question. Volume quantity discounts? Craig M.
Yes. So we will, of course, provide discounts with larger organizations. The list price that and you'll see it on the website as well, of course, can change with large organizations. And if you're an MSP, we tier out your pricing based off the size of your usage in aggregate. So if you have 1,000 users underneath all of your customers, that's how much you would pay, and you would get a pretty steep discount for that as well. So we want to make sure that you get what your money is worth associated with this. It's important that happens for sure.
They also kind of followed up in the chat with local or government discounts. So.
We do a lot of work with local municipalities. We love municipalities, and we know that there's a ton of complexity when it comes to compliance with LEO and making sure you're meeting CJIS properly. So we definitely also provide discounts on the municipalities. Please reach out. If you're a city or municipality, we love you in here, and we have a bunch of different ways to help you out. And we also understand that security is miserably difficult in the local government space as well.
All right, couple more, and let's do it. How does Blumira compare to Safetica? What are the advantages? Marcel L.
So Safetica is primarily, in my experience, I've not used Safetica. I am aware of it, focused on DLP. And we do DLP adjacently in regard to our SIEM, where we focus more on what people are doing in your environment with your data, which is to say, if you're using SharePoint, if you're using Google Drive, are people extracting data out of that environment? Are they sharing them with anonymous sources? Are they sharing them with personal emails? Are they opening up files on the security side? Are they creating files called like password.txt and opening them up with their Word? Do they have passwords that they saved in plain text? Are they moving files on and off file servers in large volumes? Those tend to be where we focus on the DLP side of it. It's not really a pure granular DLP, partially because historically in my career, I have found DLP to be the most exhausting thing ever to try to get right. So the way that we tend to focus on it is you have a kind of secure castle in your productivity suite, especially if you have a SharePoint or Google Drive. Let's make sure that people aren't moving data out of that insecurely. Let's make sure that people, if they are moving data out of it, that you're aware of it. And that tends to be our main focus on the DLP side. But if you're interested, please reach out. I can have a very long conversation about that.
Awesome. All right, final question of the day, and Jordan may be a good one to chime in on this. I created a Microsoft safety scanner using PowerShell and PDQ. It works well in the back end. Is there other software that can be quickly downloaded and ran with PowerShell? David B.
So, quickly downloaded. There's lots of different modules for PowerShell. You can remotely import any of those modules if they're in the when I think of the Microsoft repo. But as far as tools that are useful for security, I'm not familiar enough with that side of things to give a fantastic answer. I'd be curious what scanner you have for security. Are you looking for just like certain events, or because right now the best we have out there is basically trolling logs for certain events. We use it for logon events. We have a built-in scanner for that, but you can go further than that. But as far as other security, I don't know of any modules off the top of my head that can build on it.
You're wanting to create a bunch of noise with the atomic red team test, but that's going to get real wild in your environment. But it will make a lot of noise. And if you have a SIEM right now, I would recommend running it and see what happens.
So I would say that with the PowerShell community, especially security, there is going to be good modules out there. So if there's something you're looking for, just if you find the right module, with the way the repo works, you can import that on the fly with the scanner to get that module in there to run that test. I just don't know enough about what's available to build on it.
All right. I think that's it in the question queue. Like we say in the control room, camera 2.
All right.
But actually 1.
1.
Come on.
Well, yeah.
Well, no.
Either
I'm
camera.
just going to look at both.
Jordan, we have a lot of stuff in the content. Don't forget that.
Hey, everybody, thanks for tuning in today. I'm going camera 1, camera 2 here. So, security is important. We've been hammering security hard the last couple of months, but it's because it is important. I just talked to a person that does red team professionally, and it terrified me. So I've never been more security conscious in all of my life. Just hearing what he does for giggles. He's not even being malicious. It's just for fun. So it's good to know your options and what you can do, all the different ways you can attack. Thank you for Rachel for joining us and helping us with security. And thank you for Blumira for giving us some insight on how we can track what's going on in our environment. For PDQ.com, I'm Jordan.
I'm Tara.
Thanks for joining our webcast today. Congratulations, David B. and Sean S., winners of PDQ swag. Send us your info to webcast@pdq.com. Don't forget, there are several additional resources you can find in the YouTube description. And please like and subscribe to our channel. That always makes us smile. Have a fantastic week, and we'll see you back here in 2 weeks. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.